This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila and Vietnam. Hello, birthday girl, Charlene. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you, Alma. Hello, everyone. I'm Charlene Navaja, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. The Philippines has expanded travel restrictions to include 7 more countries in the red list to contain the spread of the new Omicron variant of COVID-19, according to Malacanang yesterday.
Singapore and Malaysia eased coronavirus travel restrictions on one of the world's busiest land borders Monday after nearly 2 years, allowing some vaccinated people to cross without quarantine.
Ousted Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi is expected to hear the verdict in her incitement trial on Tuesday, the first in a catalog of judgments to be handed down in a junta court that could jail her for decades.
And a new $6 billion Chinese-built railway line opens in Laos this week, bringing hopes of an economic boost to the exclusive nation. But experts are questioning the benefits of a project that has seen thousands of farmers evicted from their land.
First in our news, the Philippines has expanded travel restrictions to include 7 more countries in the red list to contain the spread of the new Omicron variant of COVID-19, according to Malacanang yesterday. The Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases, or IATF, added Austria, Czech Republic, Hungary, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Belgium, and Italy to the red list, according to a press statement from Cabinet Secretary and Acting Presidential Spokesperson Carlo Nograles. Already on the red list are South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Eswatini, and Mozambique. Prior to the declaration of the ban on Friday, South Africa, Namibia, and Zimbabwe were in the green list. The red list, or areas considered as high risk for COVID-19, will be updated after December 15. Only Filipinos returning to the country via government-initiated or non-government-initiated repatriation and so-called bayanihan, or cooperation in English, flights will be allowed entry subject to the prevailing entry, testing, and quarantine protocols for red list countries, jurisdictions, and territories. Passengers already in transit and all those who have been to the red list countries, territories, jurisdictions within 2 weeks or 14 days immediately preceding arrival to the country and who arrived before 12:01 a.m. of November 30 will not be subject to restrictions. They will undergo facility-based quarantine for 14 days with testing on the 7th day, with day 1 being the date of arrival, notwithstanding a negative reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction, or RT-PCR result.
The Philippines is closely monitoring the developments in South Africa and in Hong Kong, where a new variant of the COVID-19 virus has been detected. Given the name B.1.1.529, which is found to have a very high number of mutations, with a concern for predicted immune invasion and transmissibility. That's question.
Well, it's always possible. Pag mataas ang transmission rate, mataas rin ang mutation rate. And ito na nga yung pinag-uusapan na bagong variant na nakita dito sa South Africa na binabantayan ng lahat ngayon, yung B.1.1.529. sinusubaybayan po natin ito. Bagamat hindi pa naman siya nagte-take over katulad nung Delta, nakakabahala rin yung mutations na taglay nito. Ngayon, konti pa lang yung alam natin kasi yung mutations naman na nakikita natin, maraming mutations, more than 30 mutations nga sa spike protein, but it doesn't necessarily translate into real world. Kasi nakita nga natin, for instance, yung ating naging homegrown na variant dito sa Pilipinas, yung P3 or yung Theta, nakakatakot rin yung mutations niya. Pero hindi naman siya naging variant of concern katulad ng Alpha, Beta, Gamma, or Delta. So, while nakakabahala yung presence of certain mutations, hindi automatic na mas nakakamatay ito or mas natransmit or mas bumababa yung epekto ng ating vaccines. One thing is for sure though, kahit anong variant pa yan, gumagana pa rin po yung gagamit ng mask at yung ating minimum health standards, mape-prevent po yan. Tapos yung ating bakuna po, most likely tuloy-tuloy pa rin yung protection against severe disease. Important po kasi talaga is yung paggamit ng mga tao ng masks at yung pagsunod po sa minimum public health standards. In fact, yung face shields dapat ginagamit pa rin sa hospitals. Important po talaga na hindi tayo maging complacent kasi yung virus nandyan pa at ang virus nag-mutate. So the best way forward talaga is tanggapin na lang natin na unang-una, kailangan po talaga tayo magbakuna pero it's not as na parang silver bullet na kala natin pag may bakuna na tayo end of the pandemic. Mukhang hindi ganun yung nangyayari, nagiging endemic yung virus. Ngunit, alam naman natin yung mga gumagana na interventions katulad ng patuloy na paggamit ng masks. I think we can learn to live with this virus as long as yung ginagawa po natin, hindi po tayo magsasawa sa ating mga PDIPR and MPHS strategies.
In other news, Singapore and Malaysia eased coronavirus travel restrictions on one of the world's busiest land borders today, after nearly 2 years, allowing some vaccinated people to cross without quarantine. Before the pandemic, about 300,000 people used to commute across the border from Malaysia every day to the neighboring city-state to work in areas ranging from public transport to electronics manufacturing. But most travel was halted in March last year, leaving many who previously commuted and other Malaysians in Singapore effectively stuck there as they needed to continue working. From Monday today, vaccinated Singaporean and Malaysian citizens, those holding permanent residency status and work permits can cross the 1-kilometer causeway separating the countries without having to quarantine. Initially, around 3,000 people a day will be able to cross using special bus services and will have to take virus tests. Officials say the initial stage is aimed at workers who have been unable to see families for some time, and they plan to expand it later to other groups. Restrictions were also eased Monday on air travel, with vaccinated people allowed to fly between the country's main airports without quarantining. Prior to the easing of curbs, citizens and some other groups were still allowed to travel between the neighbors, but they had to quarantine on arrival. Both countries have high vaccination rates. Singapore's outbreak has been mild by global standards, although Malaysia faced a serious wave in recent months driven by the Delta variant.
And back to the Philippines, where the fight against the dreaded coronavirus disease 2019 or the COVID-19 and the threat of the newly discovered Omicron variant received a boost with the arrival of 547,000 and 100 more doses of AstraZeneca vaccines donated by Poland. It marked the first time that Poland provided free COVID-19 vaccines to the country since the onset of the pandemic last year. Let's take a look.
I can assure you that the spirit of solidarity in Polish society is strong and alive today. As it was in 1918 when we fought for our political independence from the Soviet regime.
We are very happy that more vaccines are coming to the Philippines and people are getting vaccinated, and they should take advantage of the vaccination drive these 3 days to get vaccinated.
Would like to thank the Polish nation and the Polish government for your generosity, and we are thinking that our relationship as nations is getting stronger every day.
Tamang-tama po ang dating nila para sa ating 3-day vaccination campaign ng gobyerno para sa ating mga kababayan. Ang Poland po at ang Pilipinas ay napakalapit na magkaibigan na bansa.
Palapit na ang araw, nakita natin dito na ang Omicron, baka mamaya ang mabigla tayo. So nakikita natin nasa Europe ang Omicron and other parts of the other countries, and nakikita natin mga 2 months, baka dumating na sa atin yan.
The life-saving jabs flown in by Emirates Flight EK332 at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport Terminal 3 on Sunday afternoon followed 3 tranches of AstraZeneca deliveries from the British government, donated through the COVAX facility. The Philippines has so far received 142,153,340 doses of COVID-19 vaccines, both procured and donated since February. And as of November 27, a total of 81,017,994 vaccine doses have been administered nationwide, while 35,557,409 Filipinos are now fully vaccinated, or that's 46.10% of the country's target population of 77.1 million.
Meanwhile, this week's World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference, the global trade body's biggest gathering in 4 years, was postponed at the last minute Friday due to the COVID-19 variant, the Omicron. The WTO hoped that the 4-day gathering in Geneva would breathe new life into the crippled organization, which has been stuck for years, trying to make progress on resolving issues like fishery subsidies. New Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was also hoping against the odds to make progress towards a deal on lifting COVID vaccine patents, proving the WTO had a relevant role to play in combating the pandemic. Fears surrounding the spread of the variant saw countries banning flights from southern Africa, where the strain was first detected on November 9. The beleaguered WTO's 12th Ministerial Conference, or MC12, has already been postponed once before due to the pandemic. It was originally due to take place in Kazakhstan capital, Nur Sultan, in June 2020. The conference normally takes place every 2 years.
The Indonesian government has decided to refuse entry to international travelers from 10 African countries and Hong Kong as precautionary measures against the importation of new COVID-19 variant named Omicron. The 10 African countries are South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Mozambique, Eswatini, Malawi, Angola, and Zambia. Coordinating Minister for Maritime Affairs and Investment, Luhut Binsar Panjaitan, said the number of countries may decrease or increase based on the results of the government's periodic evaluation. Luhut said the government had held a meeting in response to the Omicron variant of COVID-19. Although the new variant is spreading in Africa, 13 countries announced that they have detected confirmed and probable cases of Omicron variant in their countries. The Omicron variant has been detected in Germany, Belgium, Britain, Israel, Australia, and Hong Kong. Moreover, the new variant is claimed to have 5 mutations that may affect the transmission speed and the capability of virus to avoid antibody formed by vaccine or antibody produced naturally due to infection caused by the previous variant of COVID-19.
While PCR tests can detect infection with Omicron, studies are looking to whether the COVID-19 variant of concern has any impact on other types, according to the WHO on Sunday. The widely used PCR tests continue to detect infection, including infection with Omicron, as we have seen with other variants, according to the World Health Organization in an update on what is known so far about the new variant. Studies, they said, are ongoing to determine whether there is any impact on other types of tests, and that includes rapid antigen detection tests. The WHO on Friday declared Omicron, first detected earlier this month in southern Africa, to be a variant of concern. The classification put Omicron into the most troubling category of COVID variants, along with the globally dominant Delta and its weaker rivals, Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. Omicron spread across the globe on Sunday, shutting borders and renewing curbs. As the EU chief said, governments faced a race against time to understand the strain. The variant has cast doubt on global efforts to battle the pandemic due to fears that it is highly infectious, forcing countries to reimpose measures many had hoped were a thing of the past. In its update, the WHO said it was not yet clear whether Omicron spreads more easily from person to person or whether infection with the variant causes more severe disease compared to the other strains. While preliminary evidence suggests there may be an increased risk of people who previously had COVID being reinfected with Omicron, information is currently limited.
A new heavily mutated COVID-19 variant spread across the globe on Sunday, shutting borders, renewing curbs, and sparking fears for the fight against the nearly 2-year-old coronavirus pandemic. Dubbed Omicron, the strain has cast doubt on global efforts to battle the pandemic because of fears that it is highly infectious, forcing countries to reimpose measures many had hoped were a thing of the past. Dutch health authorities said they had identified at least 13 cases of Omicron among 61 quarantined passengers who tested positive for coronavirus after arriving from South Africa. The investigation has not yet been completed. The new variant may be found in more test samples, the National Institute for Public Health warned. Scientists are racing to determine the threat posed by the heavily mutated strain, particularly whether it can evade existing vaccines. But a long list of countries have already imposed travel restrictions on southern Africa, where it was first detected, including key travel hubs Qatar, the United States, Britain, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the Netherlands. Scientists in South Africa said they had last week detected the new Omicron variant with at least 10 mutations compared with 3 for Beta or 2 for Delta, the strain that hit the global recovery hard and sent millions worldwide back into lockdown.
Going back to Indonesia, the country has extended its COVID-19 quarantine period for international and international travelers, or Indonesian travelers rather, arriving in the country from 3 days to 1 week to anticipate the importation of the Omicron variant. The Indonesian government's decision to change its COVID-19 quarantine period for international travelers was disclosed by Coordinating Minister for Maritime Affairs and Investment, Luhut Binsar Panjaitan, and the foreign nationals who had ever traveled to South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Mozambique, Eswatini, Malawi, Angola, Zambia, and Hong Kong, China, within the past 14 days will be denied entry. The number of countries affected by Indonesia's temporary entry ban would periodically be evaluated, according to Panjaitan, who is also deputy head of the National Economic and COVID Recovery Committee. For Indonesians who return home from abroad but have ever traveled to the countries receiving the temporary entry ban, they will be quarantined for 2 weeks, he said. The new COVID-19 quarantine period for foreign nationals and Indonesian citizens arriving in Indonesia from abroad would have been made effective at 1 minute after midnight on November 29, according to Panjaitan. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. We'll be right back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba, sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang angking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus. Ousted Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi is expected to hear the verdict in her incitement trial on Tuesday, the first in a catalog of judgments to be handed down in a junta court that could jail her for decades. The Nobel laureate has been detained since the generals ousted her government in the early hours of February 1, ending the Southeast Asian country's brief democratic interlude. More than 1,200 people have been killed and over 10,000 arrested in a crackdown on dissent, according to a local monitoring group. Suu Kyi faces 3 years in jail if found guilty of incitement against the military, just one of the charges that analysts say are aimed at removing the democracy icon from the political arena for good. But the junta's plans for Suu Kyi remain unknown. They add, and authorities could also delay the verdict. Journalists have been barred from proceedings in the special court in the military-built capital, Naypyidaw, and her lawyers are banned from speaking to the media. Days after the coup, Suu Kyi was hit with obscure charges for possessing unlicensed walkie-talkies and for violating coronavirus restrictions during elections her National League for Democracy, or NLD, won in 2020. The junta has steadily added a slew of other indictments, including violating the Official Secrets Act, corruption, and electoral fraud. Suu Kyi now appears most weekdays at the junta courtroom with her legal team, saying last month the hectic schedule was taking a toll on the 76-year-old's health.
In other news, two Myanmar-China border crossings have reopened for trade after the movement of goods was suspended for almost 7 months due to COVID-19 restrictions, according to officials. 5 shipping containers of produce were exchanged on Friday at the Kien Sat Kaut border gate, around 11 kilometers or 6.8 miles from the northern Myanmar city of Musei. Min, vice chair of the Musei Rice Wholesale Center, said an estimated 800,000 bags of rice had been in limbo since the border was shut in April. China said it will allow more trucks to cross next week. Elsewhere in Myanmar Shan State, the Chin Shui Hao border gate also reopened for commerce Friday, according to the Chinese embassy in Yangon. China-Myanmar border trade is trying to return to normal as soon as possible, according to the embassy, posting this on Facebook alongside pictures of container trucks and officials in full plastic protective gear. The border shutdowns came as a huge blow to Myanmar's agricultural export sector, with hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue lost. The country's economy has tanked since February's military coup sparked widespread protests, bloodshed, and international sanctions. Myanmar typically exports seafood, fruit, and rice to China via land routes, while it receives electronics, medicine, and construction materials in return.
Former Cambodian Prime Minister Prince Norodom Ranariddh died in France on Sunday, the country's information minister announced on Facebook. The prince was elected prime minister in 1993 after years of civil war, only to be ousted in a bloody coup in 1997 led by forces loyal to current strongman ruler Hun Sen. Ranariddh, who was 77, died on Sunday morning following an illness, Information Minister Kyu Kanaharit wrote on a Facebook, citing a palace official. In a condolence letter sent to Ranariddh's wife, Hun Sen said his death meant the loss of an outstanding royal dignitary who loved the nation, religion, and king. The half-brother of current King Norodom Sihamoni, Ranariddh was the most politically ambitious of Cambodia's royals, but he endured something of a roller coaster career. He won Cambodia's unsponsored election in 1993 at the head of the royalist Fonsinpec party, but was forced to accept Hun Sen as co-prime minister. Hun Sen deposed him in a coup 4 years later, and Ranariddh's reputation suffered further blows over corruption allegations. He was pardoned in 2008 over a conviction for fraud, which saw him ejected from the Fonsinpec party, and made 2 more abortive political comebacks. In 2015, he made an unexpected alliance with a man who toppled him, returning to Fonsinpec in order to work with Hun Sen's Cambodian People's Party. Personal tragedy followed 3 years later when his second wife, Ok Phala, 39, was killed in a head-on car crash while on the election campaign trail with him. Fonsinpec said in a statement that Ranariddh's body would be repatriated soon, while Patrick Murphy, the U.S. ambassador to Cambodia, tweeted his condolences.
In other news, the number of overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, who have returned home since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic last year has breached the 800,000 mark. Based on Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA records, as of Sunday, 809,374 OFWs were transported home to regions after undergoing quarantine protocols and were provided assistance by the government. And those who returned consisted mostly of pandemic-affected workers and displaced OFWs due to lockdowns. The pandemic resulted in over 125 million workers unemployed worldwide, according to the International Labor Organization. Many of our OFWs became helpless when the pandemic struck, and so the government launched a massive repatriation drive never done before, according to the Department of Labor and Employment Secretary Silvestro Bello III in a news release on Sunday. OFWs were brought back via chartered flights at the expense of the government, accommodated in hotels for quarantine, and underwent COVID testing. Mr. Bello said the period November 15 to December 12 last year recorded the highest number of OFWs sent home to regions at 56,925. This year, the highest number was from October 17 to November 13 at 45,703.
And ASEAN in Focus, we'll be right back.
Mahirap talagang kalaban ng tulog.
Gising! Tayo! Uy! Uy!
Ma'am, may natutulog po sa klase. Lahat po sila.
Uy, sana all.
Eh yung busy ka tapos gusto kang lapitan ng antok.
Huwag ka lumapit dito. Sasapakin kita.
Gising na gising kayo, no?
Ma, yung spelling ba ng yellow, ma? Double L, ma? Hala, sige, gawin mo tatlo.
Tawa lang tayo para gumana ang buhay. Tawa lang hanggang malaglag ang pustiso. At bago ang ating game of the day. Yes or no? Yun! Funniest nakaball videos.
Tulong! Anak! Anak! Tulong sa atin! Ay, bakit?
Ma'am, yung pumasok ng pandemya talaga sobrang dagok. Talaga grabe yung ginawa sa amin. Tapos sasabihan pa ng sakit ng asawa ko. Ultimo gamot, ma'am. Magkano lang yung gamot? 2, 3. Hindi ko pa mabili. Siguro, pagsubok lang naman to. Hindi naman siguro ibigay sa akin to kung hindi ko kaya.
Hindi nagsasalita. Naninikip yung dibdib niya. Tapos, pumunta ka na ngayon dito, kuya.
Ano naman? Puro kabiro.
And presence of uniformed personnel to enforce quarantine procedures.
Para kang superhero, Papa.
Isipin may makakain ka lang. Diba? Pero sabi nila na lalabas ka. Hindi ka ba nihawa sa anak mo paglabas mo? Hindi mo alam po nakakuha na ng sakit. Diba ganun? Ako inisip po. Kasi naman, hindi ako lumabas. Gutom naman kami.
Para sa isang tatay, napakasarap maramdaman na buong-buo ang tiwala ng iyong pamilya. Nasama-sama niyong malalagpasan at mapagtatagumpayan ang anumang hamon ng buhay. Kahit na mabigat na pagsubok ang pinagdadaanan natin, bagong pag-asa at bagong inspirasyon ang ihahatid namin sa inyo.
Pinapangarap niya na mapagamot siya, ma'am. Ito na yung katuparan na para mapagamot siya. Ito na yung katuparan na para mapagamot yung misis ko. Sir Eduardo B. Manalo, maraming salamat po sa naitulong nyo na ibinigay po sa aking pamilya.
Kaya kung kayo ay may kakilala, kaibigan o kamag-anak na nais nyong lingapin ang aming programa, ipadala nyo sa amin ang kanyang kwento. Ako po si Apple David at ito ang Lingap Stories.
Welcome back. The British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab, along with South Korean Singaporean and Vietnamese counterparts attend ASEAN-European Meeting, or ASEAN, High Policy Dialogue in Hanoi to discuss various issues including trade, the fight against COVID-19, and climate change. UK Foreign Minister Rab said the UK have started talks to join CPTPP trade treaty. Let's take a look.
Free trade. We warmly welcome the signal from ASEAN leaders that they will accept the UK's application to become a dialogue partner. We're starting negotiations to join CPTPP, and we've put a major focus on the Indo-Pacific in the context of the G7 presidency that we host this year. And I think joining the CPTPP will provide a boost economically for all sides. It's a high-quality, win-win multilateral trade deal. But it's also a boost to the principle of free trade as we work with others to try and help shape and reinforce future trading rules. I think it's also an important signal that CPTPP and the region can send to other countries.
ASEAN partners have continued to do our best to keep our economies open and to integrate our economies and to continue to stand for the cause of free trade despite the political opposition accentuated by the fears brought on by COVID-19.
Meanwhile, more than 50 European and Asian leaders called for vaccine equity Friday at the virtual summit as a new COVID-19 variant was detected in South Africa. The two-day 13th summit of the Asia-Europe meeting, or ASEM, hosted by Cambodian leader Hun Sen, came as nations raced to slow the spread of the new, more infectious strain known as B11529 that scientists fear could be more resistant to vaccines. Globally, coronavirus jab distribution has been unequal, with poorer nations' vaccination rates remaining at dismal levels, while wealthier countries push booster jabs. In a statement after the summit, leaders emphasized the need for all countries to have equitable and timely access to COVID-19 testing, medication, and vaccines. They also called for the strengthening of national and multilateral approaches and international cooperation over the pandemic. We will continue sharing vaccines with the world, according to European President Ursula von der Leyen after the summit. But she also warned that increased vaccine manufacturing capacity was needed to reach a 70% global vaccination rate by mid-2022. Europe has already exported more than 550 million doses to the Asia-Pacific region, she said, adding that global solidarity is vital to end the pandemic.
Charles Michel, the president of the European Council, says EU's strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific sends a strong political signal. Let's take a look.
The Indo-Pacific region is increasingly important for the EU, and we are already a top investor in this region. And we have decided to reinforce our strategic focus and actions with the region. Our new EU strategy for cooperation with the Indo-Pacific sends a strong political signal. We want to work closer together on green, digital connectivity and security issues.
The method for the following meetings.
The 13th ASEM took place following earlier postponements due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The previous 12th ASEM summit took place in Brussels on 18 to 19 October 2018. Established in 1996, ASEM is an informal platform for political dialogue and cooperation, which now brings together 53 partners, making it the biggest international leaders gathering after United Nations General Assembly. It consists of 51 partner countries and 2 organizational partners. the EU, and ASEAN. Of the 51 partner countries, 30 are in the European group, 27 European Union member states, Norway, Switzerland, and the UK. The EEAS coordinates the European group together with the Council Presidency, which is an informal secretariat role.
Aspirations. Because in fact, if you look
Staying in the region, Asian markets fell again Monday, but oil rebounded strongly as investors tried to assess the threat of the new Omicron COVID strain on the global economic recovery. Equities around the world went into free fall Friday on news of the heavily mutated variant, which some fear could evade vaccines, as it forced several governments to throw up flight bans from Southern Africa, where it was discovered, and introduced fresh containment measures. The crisis added to an already jittery mood on trading floors caused by surging inflation and central banks starting to roll back their ultra-loose monetary policies to prevent prices from running out of control. Omicron's uncertainty has triggered a rethink of the global economic outlook, said National Australia Bank's Rodrigo Catril. A new COVID wave, he said, may or may not be more infectious or deadly, but until we know more, markets are likely to remain jittery. All three main indexes on Wall Street ended more than 2% down, while London, Paris, and Frankfurt were also pummeled at least 3.6% lower. But even those losses were dwarfed by crude, which fell off a cliff on its worst day since WTI went below $0 at the outset of the pandemic, with dealers fretting over the possible impact on demand if more lockdowns are introduced. The Asian equities, which also suffered hefty selling pressure, extended losses on Monday, though the selling was a lot lighter. Tokyo and Hong Kong flirted with positive territory in the morning, but remained in the red, while Shanghai, Sydney, Seoul, Singapore, Taipei, Wellington, Manila, and Jakarta also retreated. And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. Charlene and I will be back right after this break.
Ngayong may pandemya, marami ang walang trabaho at mataas ang presyo ng bilihin. Isa sa nakikitang solusyon para makaiwas sa pagkagutom ay ang pagtatanim. May ilan, problemado sa espasyo dahil maliit ang kanilang lugar. Pero may sagot riyan para makapagtanim, ang hydroponics. Sa hydroponics, hindi ginagamitan ng lupa ang pinagtataniman, kundi tubig at nutrient solution lamang. Sa hydroponics, makakapagtanim ka ng gulay at kahit anong halaman. Masusolusyonan ang problema sa kagutuman at matutugunan ang seguridad sa pagkain.
Welcome back. A new $6 billion Chinese-built railway line opens in Laos this week, bringing hopes of an economic boost to the reclusive nation. But experts are questioning the benefits of a project that has seen thousands of farmers evicted from their land. Take a look.
การส่งมอบรถไฟลานสร้างในสุดนี้สุดที่มีความหมายสำคัญให้แก่สองชาติลาวและจีนลาว
一个决定性的进展，也是中国“一带一路”倡议从老挝变陆锁国为陆联国战略对接的一个标志性的成果。
The 414-kilometer or 260-mile route, due to open on December 3, took 5 years to construct under China's trillion-dollar Belt and Road Initiative, which funds infrastructure projects aimed at increasing Beijing's clout globally. The train route will connect the Chinese city of Kunming to the Laos capital, with grand plans for high-speed rail to ultimately snake down through Thailand and Malaysia to Singapore. Infrastructure, poor Laos, a reclusive communist-run country of 7.2 million people, previously had only 4 kilometers of railway tracks. But now, sleek red, blue, and white bullet trains will speed along the new line at up to 160 kilometers per hour or 100 miles per hour, passing through 75 tunnels and across 167 bridges, stopping at 10 passenger stations. Despite registering only dozens of COVID cases until April, Laos' economy took a pandemic battering. Economic growth declined to 0.4% in 2020, the lowest level in 3 decades, according to the World Bank. Hopes for a 2021 rebound were dashed. Laos locked down as it clocked up roughly 70,000 infections in the past 8 months. And while the railway could boost tourism, freight, and agriculture, according to a World Bank report, the government needs to undertake substantial reforms, including improving border clearance processes.
Olympic gold medalist Victor Axelsen clinched the Indonesia Open men's single after beating Singapore's Loh Kian Yeoh in the final on Sunday. The 27-year-old scored a victory against Loh 21-13, 9-21, 21-13 in an intense 59-minute game in the badminton tournament held on the palm fringed holiday island of Bali. Axelsen's victory came after his compatriot Anders Antonsen was forced to withdraw from the tournament due to an injury in his right chest. In the men's doubles, hometown heroes Marcus Gideon and Kevin Sanjaya Sukumojo won the title after defeating Japan's Takuro Hoki and Yugo Kobayashi, who stunned them in the final of Indonesian Masters a week earlier. The world's number one, affectionately known by fans as the Minions, redeemed themselves from last week's defeat by beating the Japanese pair 21-14, 21-18 in a 38-minute game. In the women's singles, South Korea's An Se-young secured the title after beating second-seeded Ratchanok Intanon from Thailand to 21-17, 22-20. The 19-year-old An also won the women's singles title at the Indonesian Masters last week. An was very solid and clever in using the opportunities presented, Intanon said after the match. In the women's doubles, Indonesia's Olympics gold medalist Gracia Poli and Apriyani Rahayu suffered defeat against Japan's Nami Matsuyama and Chiharu Shida to 19-21 and 19-21. The Indonesia Open takes place from November 23 to 28, and the season-ending BWF Tour Finals run from December 1st to 5th.
Thank you always, Charlene, for keeping me company today on your birthday, on your special day. Happy birthday again, Charlene. What do you plan to do this day?
Well, I'll spend time with my friends, and yeah, I still have work though. But yeah, being here in ASEAN is one of the best places to spend.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charlene.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alma. And I would also like to greet a happy belated birthday to our Maldives correspondent, Steffi.
Yes, that's right. Happy birthday, Steffi, to our EBC correspondent in the beautiful island nation of Maldives. Happy birthday, Steph. Thank you, Charlene.
Thank you, Alma, and thank you to everyone. And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. Thank you for joining us today here in ASEAN in Focus. This is Charlene Navaja from your Vietnam Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
We'll see you back tomorrow, same time, same place, here on ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.
Thank you and hello from Orange Beach, Alabama. Today, we will explore one of the hidden gems in the state of Alabama, the town and the shores of Orange Beach, just a few miles from the Gulf Shores. The town of Orange Beach is named after the citrus groves that were planted during the early 1900s but were destroyed by the severe weather and hurricanes. Located in southern Alabama, along the Gulf of Mexico, the town of Orange Beach welcomes tourists from all over the nation.